Over the years, I've worked with countless guys who wanted to push their limits, who wanted to build real muscle, get brutally strong, and achieve a physique that just turns heads. But only a select few fully commit to this process, commit to the grind, to the relentless pursuit of becoming the best version of themselves. And today, I want to introduce to you one of them, Egemen Vasquez. He's been training under me for years, applying the same no-nonsense, results-driven methods that have built some of the most impressive physiques of all time. He's put in the work, he's made the sacrifices, and now, as he prepares for his first bodybuilding competition, he's also stepping up in another big way. Because today, I'm officially bringing him on as an assistant coach in my online coaching program, Relentless Physique. The reason he's here with me today isn't because he's just another guy who lifts. He embodies the hardcore mentality, the discipline, the intensity that this coaching program was built on. And now he's here to help take Relentless Physique to the next level. So today, I want to properly introduce him to you because this is just the beginning. We're about to take this coaching program to the next level, and you're not going to want to miss what's coming next. So let's get to it.
What is the biggest BS fitness advice that guys still believe? And when I hear this question, I know that there's, at least to me, there's a ton that I want to answer here. So feel free to go with one or as many as you want. Like, what's on the top of your mind right now? What do you think the biggest BS fitness advice is that guys still believe?
What comes to mind, and yeah, I also agree there's a lot, but kind of soreness equals growth. So soreness can
Mhm.
be a good sign, and it is typically a sign that you're training hard, but it shouldn't be your primary goal because you can also get really sore without properly like stimulating growth either, which is by just doing, 5 sets of 50 reps with super low weight and, resting really short. So
Yeah,
the
it's one
whole,
thing.
yeah,
Sorry to cut you off. It's one thing because
yeah.
I just thought of another point that I wanted to mention to that. It's one of those things that guys will associate the soreness with a good session too, right?
Hmm.
Um, and some of my worst sessions have resulted in some pretty decent soreness just simply because I've either switched up an exercise or done
Hmm.
something completely different, right? And a lot of times, like I will try adjusting my training to realize that like if I'm going to use a different exercise in my routine, if I try to swap out an exercise for another one and the session really just doesn't go that well, I don't connect with the exercise, I decide not to keep it in the routine. I could
Hmm.
be brutally sore from that session,
Yeah.
but I've had zero pump during the session, no good mind muscle connection, and just literally a different stimulus created soreness. Um,
Yeah.
but that doesn't necessarily mean it's growth.
Yeah. I remember just Arnold saying you gotta confuse the muscle and just
Mhm.
constantly doing new stuff and
Mhm.
creating soreness from the novel stimulus isn't it can trick you into thinking like, oh, I've damaged the muscle, I've creating growth, it's sore. Because there's a lot of dogma around it, and I still see it today as well. And the issue with bodybuilding or just, transforming is, you're not like a car with a dashboard telling you exactly what's going on. So it's kind of up to you and your senses, which is soreness, your energy, and other stuff. And when you haven't learned how to kind of process those, you don't really know what to attribute as good and bad. So, for a lot of people and like me, I was kind of blind and first few years I would chase soreness and I made
Mhm.
zero growth.
Yeah, you know what's funny too, because it's funny you mentioned that about Arnold, and like one of my first exposures to bodybuilding was watching Pumping Iron, right?
Hmm.
And obviously, like as a kid, like I've seen muscle magazines and bodybuilders and things like that, but like one of the first real exposures to like the process of building muscle and bodybuilding was watching Pumping Iron. And I always
Hmm.
remember Arnold talking about, going past the pain barrier and, those reps where you're doing those additional reps closer to failure, like that's what makes the body grow, right? And
Hmm.
obviously, intense sets close to failure, like those are the growth stimulating reps, right?
Hmm.
But kind of the logic I took out of that statement, young, like as a young kid, as like 14, that's when I started training, was the fact is, it's the pain that's really, bringing on the muscle growth, right? So I would literally train not thinking, okay, I'm taking sets close to failure, but thinking, how do I make this experience the most painful experience possible? And when I
Yeah.
say pain, I mean good pain, right?
Hmm.
Um, So like I would train to feel super fatigued. I basically would more or less just try to cripple the muscle. And that was my way of associating a good workout, right?
Yep.
How crippled and destroyed that muscle was after the session. Not necessarily thinking about any one particular set or exercise as being productive, but just when I leave the gym after I train that body part, how trashed is that body part, right?
Yep.
So I would basically train the muscle to exhaustion. And don't get me wrong, I actually saw decent results training that way. And that
Yeah.
was in the newbie stages of training, which, fortunately, when you're a newbie, any stimulus that at least one that you could recover from is going to produce growth. But it definitely wasn't ideal by any means. And I was definitely, borderline overtraining for most of those years. And it wasn't until I really started understanding exactly what I should be doing each and every set in terms of volume and intensity that I started to see consistent growth, right? But the
Yep.
beauty is in the beginning when you first start training, if you have intensity down, you're going to see some growth, right? And I think that's the thing a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people lack in the beginning, especially now. And this is a topic we're probably going to touch on in a little bit. Is a lot of guys today try to make up for that lack of intensity with other fancy things. Like they try to make up for it with either additional volume, magical exercises, frequencies, things like that. And I
Mm-hmm.
always say that, intensity and effort can fix a lot of things, but you can't fix the lack of intensity and effort with all of these other variables, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that intensity and that effort has to be in place.
Yeah, the magic exercises or the EMG studies, and
Hmm.
this thing activates the muscle more than, some barbell. Like, just
Yeah.
because it activates the muscle more doesn't mean that it's that much more stimulus. Because you could just activate your lat better than anything
Hmm.
with no weight. You just crunch it right now, and it's
Exactly.
pretty much 100%. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
100%. And I say that all the time too, like people will argue with that, right? They'll say like, okay, that's the study shows that, there's more activation in the muscle here, so it's better, right? But
Mm-hmm.
most people won't argue with the fact that if I tell them, listen, what builds bigger legs? Is it a squat, a hack squat, or a compound lift, or a leg extension, right? And there's not one other exercise that targets the quads more specifically than a leg extension, right?
Mm-hmm.
But nobody's built massive quads just doing leg extensions. Like everybody
Yep.
understands the fact that these compound lifts are what's actually going to drive like real large muscle growth, right?
Yep.
So there's a lot more to it than just that. And as far as what I think is like, again, there's so many things as far as BS fitness advice that guys still believe. That's definitely one of them. Like I said, I have so many that I want to say here, but like
Mm-hmm.
what comes to like the top of my head right now, and it's usually whatever's trending at the moment. And right now, at least, like when I put out content and I talk about things, like the one thing that I keep getting and hearing as a rebuttal when I talk about like frequency and things like that is a lot of times people will quote either a study or an argument out of the science-based community saying that you know, as long as volume is the same for the week, the frequency doesn't matter at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand the basic logic behind it, right? So if you're doing 10 sets a week per body part, the logic is it doesn't matter if you do all those 10 sets in one session or if it's 5 and 5, right? I get it. It's still over the 7 day period, it's 10 sets, right? But that's not taking into account what those sets are going to look like if you combine them all in one session, right? So,
Yep.
number one, your body's not keeping a tally. Like, okay, we did 7 sets so far. We just got to get 3 more for the rest of the week. And then we're done. We're going to grow, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not keeping a tally. What it's doing is it's getting a stimulus, recovering from that stimulus, and then you're going to give it another stimulus whenever you do, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if you give it a 5 set stimulus and that 5 set stimulus is enough to grow, and you could recover within that same week and do it again, you're creating 2 effective stimuluses in 1 week, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're doing 10 sets in one session, and let's say that the first 5 are productive, the second 5 are potentially going to be way worse than if you did the other 5 on a different day, right? So
Yep.
now those extra 5 sets are not as stimulating as they would be if you did them fresh, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily leading to double the stimulus that you would get in one session if you combine both of them. So now you might just actually have more ineffective sets, which, is basically junk volume, right?
Yep.
So I'm not saying that 5 sets twice a week is going to always be better than 10 sets once a week. If you can train productively through 10 sets, you might create a bigger stimulus than you would with just five, but you also have to have the ability to recover from that soon enough to create another stimulus, right?
Mm-hmm.
But most people, I find that the point of diminishing returns is way sooner than 10 sets,
Yep.
especially if they are productive sets. So that's one that I wanted to touch on because I keep hearing that over and over again. And
Yeah.
anybody that reads a study can argue that, volume, if it's equated, is going to be the same. But anybody that's actually trained hard knows that there's no way of replicating 10 sets in one session versus five over 2 sessions.
Yeah. And yeah, kind of to rephrase what you said, like not all sets are equal. It's always the first set is the most quality, and just
Mhm.
by nature, the following sets, the quality starts to drop down. You can't have
Mhm.
all 10 sets in the session be of
Right.
exact same quality. Otherwise, you're not pushing yourself hard enough. And this is especially important when you're in a calorie deficit. Like right now, I'm deep in a cut, for contest prep. And I could not do that many, not 10, but, I was doing upper lower 4 days a week. But I switched to kind of this modified upper lower. I do chest and quads and triceps, and then back biceps and hamstrings now. And then I don't really have a rest day anymore because I found it more productive for me to just keep the daily volume low and spread it out evenly. So I do accessories on my rest days now, and that allows me to be more productive while kind of doing the same amount of work that I was doing. Because I just get, after 1 hour, I'm gassed out. I'm
Yeah.
drinking intro workout shake with carbs, but I still get gassed out pretty quick. So to keep the quality high, I
Mhm.
just took some of the exercises from my official workout days and threw them in my rest day.
Yeah,
And
it's funny because, as you mentioned, especially in a deficit, like quality of work is going to be the biggest thing, especially if your goal is muscle retention when you're dieting, right?
mm-hmm,
Quality work's always going to be important, even if your goal is building muscle. The higher quality work that you do each and every session is just going to build more muscle over time. But
mm-hmm,
in a caloric deficit, that is key. Um, and usually that will require some fine tuning, like you mentioned, to keep those workouts as high quality as possible. And it's funny because when you get very deep into prep or you're in a deep diet phase, your workout will evolve not so much as far as like you're changing the training method or the split or anything like that, but you're literally moving things just to keep the quality of work higher, right?
mm-hmm,
And that's like the perfect example of why you can't just simply say, okay, if I want to, we were talking about muscle building, but if we're talking about muscle retention, and you were doing, let's just say 10 sets a week and you were building muscle off of that for that body part, you can't just simply say, okay, I want to maintain muscle tissue. As long as I get my 10 sets in, I'm going to maximize muscle retention. You have to find a way to keep the quality of work for those 10 sets as high as possible. And
mm-hmm,
usually, again, when you get down to a caloric deficit, you don't have the ability to kind of keep that intensity super high for long periods of time. So you're going to have to fine tune your training split the way you described to be able to do that. And it's funny because I'm kind of at
mm-hmm,
that stage right now myself. I'm not super deep into a diet yet, but like it's funny because a productive training split, especially at the advanced levels, it's just to explain it. It's not as cut and dry as just saying like, okay, I trained chest on Monday, back on Tuesday. There's a lot of things as far as like creative overlap. And like you said, combining muscle groups into one session that you wouldn't necessarily do if you had the ability to train longer, you have more calories and things like that. So it's funny because it takes a few minutes to kind of describe my training split as well right now. Whereas maybe like in an off-season setting, it would be very straightforward. Like, oh, I'm doing a push-pull leg split. I do 2 on 1 off. When we get down
yep,
to dieting phases, I might be combining more body parts. Like I have push days where I'm still even doing some indirect back work and things like that for strategic overlap. And again, it's
mm-hmm,
just to spread out that volume so that I keep the quality of work as high as possible. And that just shows how important the quality of work is, and splitting that volume up appropriately really is in your training.
Exactly.
But yeah, we talked about, you kind of touched on this a little bit, but I'm curious, and I always find this interesting because a lot of guys will eventually evolve in their training based on the things that kind of held them back early on, right? So like what's kind of the one mistake that killed your gains for years, like when you first started training? I know you mentioned it in the beginning, but like let's talk about that a little bit more because I know my training has evolved so much over the years because of what I initially did when I first started training. And we kind of started in a little bit of a different era. I started more like kind of in like the Flex magazine era, right? So like all the information that was available was just typical like bro splits in a magazine, and everybody did
Hmm.
that, right? Today, if somebody was starting right now, I doubt anybody's starting with a bro split. Like they're going for this like super advanced, overcomplicated split. So it's like it's completely different starting point. So for me, like it evolved from like, okay, I'm doing the typical body part split. And obviously that didn't serve me very well. It wasn't appropriate for me when I first started training. And I would say that, um, the first maybe 3 years or so, like I hammered away at that just to try to get whatever progress I could out of it. And, again, for me, I got some decent results again because the intensity was there. That's something I never lacked was intensity in my training. But man,
Hmm.
once I started to understand volume, frequency, and intensity, I like hit a new level of newbie gains after I started really thinking about my training in terms of volume, frequency, intensity, not just, okay, I'm going to the gym today, it's leg day, let's train legs hard. So I'm curious
Yeah.
for you, kind of like, where were you at when you started and what was like the biggest mistake that held you back?
Real quick before I get into that, that
Mhm.
reminded me of something where, you said you understood volume and frequency and then it brought back newbie gains. And I think it's so important for people to realize because I think the general public thinks, okay, you start training, you're in the newbie phase, and then, a few months later, newbie gains are gone and they're never
Yeah.
going to come back. But actually, if you're doing it right to where you're training hard and evolving over time, like learning, getting better, your newbie gains go because you hit a plateau. But when you find out the solution, they come right back.
Yeah.
So newbie gains, you can define it different ways, but when I think newbie gains, I think I'm adding 5 to 10 pounds on the bar every week.
Mhm.
And that has happened even to this day. Well, not during my deep cut, but even during my cut for this, before it got really extreme, I was still doing that 4 or 5 years into training.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
like this is for people like don't get discouraged just because you're a year and 2 years in. 99% of the time you have no idea how much left you have. And I'm betting you that you have so many more newbie gains left to
Yeah.
discover.
Yeah.
But one of the biggest things, I think there's actually three, but starting with one was just diet. You don't even have to like start with tracking every macro to begin with, but you should have some ballpark estimate that you can get close to at first. Where I didn't in college, I bought someone's program and I just focused on training, but I had a protein shake after my workout and I thought that was good.
Mhm.
I'd make an effort like, oh, I ate eggs for breakfast and then chicken sandwich for lunch. And when in reality, I was probably eating 40, 60 grams of protein under what I should have been
Mhm.
daily. And some days, probably even less. And just because you had a whey protein shake doesn't mean your protein goals are met. Yeah, diet is huge. And the thing is, like, when you're a newbie, like we spoke about earlier, you can do a lot of things wrong and you'll see results.
Mhm.
And that's a good thing, but it can also fool you into thinking you're doing the right stuff. So, and
Yeah.
that's how I thought. And after like a year, 2 years in college training, I made progress, but it wasn't satisfying. It wasn't, I still, if I didn't have a pump, it looked like I never went to the gym. That can be discouraging. And understand because I thought myself that, oh, I just didn't have the genetics. I bought a program, I did what it said. It only spoke about training, so only did the training part. But I didn't see nearly as much growth as I did when I joined with you and you were training me, and when I finally dialed everything in. And even in the beginning, I was not anywhere near as dialed in as I am now. And my growth was just three, four times better. In a few months, I grew more muscle than 2 years in college. It was actually mind blowing. Part of the reason why I wanted to become a coach, and like my whole life changed, from just seeing that much progress. But yeah, diet is super important, and for people, it is one of the toughest thing to nail down because nobody wants to whip out a scale before they put
Hmm.
anything in their
Yeah.
mouth. It is very annoying. I 100% sympathize, but if you want serious results, it must be
Hmm.
done. And you can start out with just, quickly calculate. You don't even have to do math. It's how much protein do you
Yeah.
need? Just step on the scale, look at that number in pounds, and yeah,
I
that's
know
how
it's
many
super simple.
grams. And then just, start there, and you don't even need to measure every day. Just measure a day or two, and then you form that intuition, right? Like, okay, the day I tracked, I ate this much meat, and you saw the portions, right, in each meal. So you start to build that intuition, and it's not like you have to meticulously calculate every single day of your life. If you do, that's how you optimize.
Right.
That's the issue I see today. To be optimal is not a bad pursuit at all. I think it's great to pursue being optimal, but you got to do it the right way. And that's the issue today is most people don't.
Hmm.
They focus on the wrong things, the micros, the
Right.
um,
Hmm.
using the cables for 20% more lat activation. And when you should be focused on, are you eating enough? Are you feeding your body the required nutrients on it consistently, right? If you miss protein intake just 2 days a week, that is over a quarter of the entire year you spent stunting your growth. So it's like, oh, 2 days a week, whatever. I just jerk off on the
Right.
weekends on my diet, and it shouldn't be that big. It adds up over a
Hmm. Oh
year.
yeah.
It really adds up. So for those people looking to optimize, I think this is where you need to start. Yeah, going back to the question, so diet, right?
Yeah.
Feed your
Hmm.
body the nutrients it needs. Next was resting between sets. This is not talked about a lot, but it's really big. And while I'm saying resting, this actually goes into intensity. So I used to rest 30, 60 minutes, minutes, seconds.
Hmm.
But
Yeah, which is kind of the standard like bodybuilding mentality, right? Like you always
yeah,
hear that like quick rest periods, 30 seconds, 60 seconds. And I'm like,
it
when
is
people
so
say they
bad.
rest 30 seconds, I'm like, does anybody realize how short 30 seconds rest is after a hard
Hmm.
set? Like literally, like if I do a set of leg extensions for 15 or 20 reps, 30 seconds later, I might not literally have even got off the machine yet. You know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Yeah,
Um, and guys talking about how they're ready to go within 30, 60 seconds makes me question what they're doing.
yeah. And I love this saying, and it's something to remember that it's too easy to rest too little, but
Hmm.
too hard to rest too much. So
Hmm.
don't ever worry about, oh, I rested too much, right? I always rest 2 to 5 minutes, depending on, how much weight I'm moving, like the exercise. If I'm doing RDLs, I'm going to be resting closer to 5 minutes between sets. And then for something like arms, 2 minutes is usually solid.
Hmm.
But yeah, that's the issue. It's not just about catching your breath. You got to actually let, the lactic acid dissipate as much as possible. It's never going to go to the level at before you exercise, but
Hmm.
you got to give yourself plenty of time to keep that intensity high. And the
Hmm.
issue I was making in college, on top of not eating enough, is I would rest a minute between sets
Hmm.
of
Yeah.
barbell bench press in like a 5 to 10 rep range. That is nowhere near enough. For bench, I typically rest 3 now and
Hmm.
noticed way more progress. It's not even funny. Like you can't even compare the progress
Oh yeah.
I
Oh yeah. I
noticed.
mean, I would say for me, the average rest period between sets is close to 3 minutes, like
Yep.
average. And if I do a
Yep.
really heavy set, it could be 5 minutes, no problem.
Yep.
And I love that you bring this up because I think everything you said kind of ties into the fact that like 90% of your results are going to be from kind of pulling the big levers, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's so many fine details that you could, obsess about when it comes to building muscle, burning fat, whether it's nutrition, training, or anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like one of the big levers to pull, as far as stimulating your muscles to grow in the gym, is just simply doing hard sets, right?
Mm-hmm.
Without worrying about, like you said, like the 5% extra lat activation or anything like that, even worrying so much about the specific rep range or things like that. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times people will get caught up in, again, talking about volume or things like that. The problem is their mentality is, okay, I need to do X amount of hard sets to grow, right? So if you just think, okay, I need to do 10 sets to grow, right? Um, you're not really thinking about your rest periods, right? So you're just kind of checking off those 10 sets. And that usually leads to guys resting too shortly, right? Because they want to kind of just bang out those sets, go about their day, get the session over.
Mm-hmm.
But, and this is proven time and time again, the quality of those sets are going to be much more important than the volume, right? So if you need to do 10 sets to stimulate chest, let's say, and you're resting 60 seconds to get the job done, you might find that you could stimulate just as much muscle growth, or, and in most cases, I'm willing to bet for most anybody, more muscle growth by doing even as little as 5 or 6, but taking sufficient rest between those sets, because each one of those sets is going to be much more stimulating, and cause a greater growth stimulus simply because you rested long enough to be able to be productive on those next sets.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is just your mindset too. As far as when you go in the gym, what you're looking to actually accomplish, right? If you're looking to just check things off of a list, it's going to lead to a lot of very poor habits in the gym. And short rest periods is a huge one, and that's, like I said, it's very common. I see it all the time. People are rushing through their sessions, um, and I'm there moving slow. And a lot of times people will ask me too, like one of the biggest questions I get when I get a new client or I send over a client plan, they'll look at it and they'll say, great, just one question. Um, how long am I resting between sets? As if it should be an arbitrary number. And the reason I
Mm-hmm.
don't put the number of, you know, I don't put a number of specific rest time is there's a lot of variables that change minute to minute, session to session, day to day, week to week, right? Like if you're a bit sleep deprived, you didn't have, you had a stressful day, like your body's just not
On a
firing,
diet.
yeah, or on a prep, yeah, anything that could affect your performance that day. Your goal is still to keep the quality of those sets as high as possible. And
Mm-hmm.
on a day where you're not feeling the best, that might simply just be resting a little bit longer between sets. And like an extra 30 seconds or even a minute could literally be the game changer that you need
Yep.
to be able to keep the quality of those sets high. So if you had 3 sets on an exercise to perform, but you're just not moving quickly that day, you're not recovering very fast, your performance on those 3 sets can literally be a night and day difference if you rested 60 seconds versus if you rested 3 minutes, right? And taking those extra 2 minutes rest if needed on the fly could literally be the difference between you matching your best performance or even hitting a PR versus you just
Mm-hmm.
having a terrible session due to outside external factors, right? And
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing I think more advanced lifters will eventually learn and be able to apply is how to listen to their own body's feedback on the fly and be able to make those calls when needed. And I like all my clients to be able to get to that point where they can make that call on the fly, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's great to stick to a rigid plan, and it's great to, you need a plan and you need a goal every time you go in the gym if you're looking to maximize your training. But you have to have the ability to adjust things based on what's happening in the moment. And I think that's a goal everybody should strive for over time.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that a lot of things, again, get kind of messed up with the trends on social media these days because again, everybody's got it figured out, right? Like if you listen to anybody, they all know the science, they all know the optimal training plan. They all know if you do X, Y, and Z, you've maximized everything. And again, anybody that's trained for a long period of time know it doesn't work that way. There's so many variables that change on a daily basis. There's all unique pros and cons to all of these methods, and a lot of times, real maximize and optimal training is going to come down to executing on the basics, but just doing them more consistently and more efficiently than anybody else, right? So, I mean, we've talked about this, on our own so many times, but it's a topic I want to just touch on a bit more here, and it's just literally, you know, what are your thoughts on social media as far as like fitness content? Like, do you think it's making people weaker? Do you think it's putting people at a disadvantage? Do you think it's helping? I'd say there's a combination of both in there, but overall, like where the state of social media is right now with like information, what's your thoughts on it? And I know we spoke about how it's actually changing a bit, so
Hmm.
let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it's a complex one. Overall, there's ups and downs to it. Definitely as a whole, it is a bit better than 10
Hmm.
years ago. We're overall moving slowly in the right direction. But it's still just as easy to get lost in nuance and things that don't matter and still make no progress for the average person. And one of the biggest issues I have with social media, well, this one will never go away, is because the content that goes viral is usually not the most valuable, and the most
Hmm.
valuable content doesn't go viral because it focuses on the basics, and the basics aren't flashy and pretty, and it doesn't sound like, oh, this. Always when I do like content research, I look at, okay, what's the most viral fitness reels out? And it's always some stupid plate press that tones the muscle and this new weird cable variation. Like it has this connotation that it's like new, hasn't been tried before, and
Hmm.
it's going to get you more results. And, that's appealing. That's like,
Yeah.
sales. And then that's what drives retention and views. And then therefore, content creators are that just care about that, it's kind of like they're rewarded for
Yeah.
it. And it's not their fault. It's not the viewer's fault. It's not like Mark Zuckerberg's just
Yeah.
making
Yeah.
sure the BS stuff goes, the algorithms, not,
Hmm.
nobody's at fault here, but yeah, it's a trap. And there's a
Yeah.
lot of traps on social media, and it's very hard for someone who has never been coached before, who doesn't know right from wrong, because, when it comes to fitness and bodybuilding, you don't have a dashboard and everything telling you exactly what's right and what's wrong.
Yeah.
And, you don't have that years of experience of trying and failing to guide your knowledge. But yeah, it's the issue. Social media is 90% of it's training, but
Yeah.
bodybuilding,
Yeah.
like is bodybuilding is training, nutrition, and recovery.
Right.
So training is a third of it's very important, right?
Hmm.
But it is only a third of the
Right.
equation.
Can't just do one. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And it's not bad that, people like, I'm not saying any fitness creator out there that focuses on training is bad. You don't have to be dividing equally in thirds your content, but at least make your content valuable. And like, if you're going to talk about training, talk about the right things and what actually
Right.
matters.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it best. I mean, it's just the fact that unfortunately these creators are rewarded for putting out specific types of content, right? So if they're
Mm-hmm.
being rewarded, they're likely going to just keep doing it, right, to a certain degree. And
Mm-hmm.
um, it's something, I've been doing this a long time too. I've been putting out content for years, and I see what content does the best, and it's very you're incentivized to obviously put out things that okay, this is going to generate a lot of attention, but you're also questioning, how much value is going to be provided here, right? And I've always tried to lead with what I believe. I've never been one where I'll put aside what I personally believe will help you the best just to put out a piece of content that I think will do better, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I think that message has been well received because I've gotten the feedback from people a lot over the years, like when they meet me in person. Always say like, I love how you keep it real. You give, no nonsense advice. And, that's really always been my objective. And, for me, it's actually worked in my favor to consistently promote the basics. And, it's attracted a lot of people that kind of have the ability to kind of sift through all the nonsense online, which has always been my goal, right? Because unfortunately, for anybody just getting into this game now, if your first exposure to information about building muscle and burning fat is Instagram, social media, YouTube, I'd say, is a little bit better than Instagram. Instagram is and TikTok are probably the biggest at fault here. But if
Mm-hmm.
if those are your first experiences, exposure to learning how to do this the right way, you're going to be bombarded with a lot of nonsense, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
So my advice to people just starting out too, like, um, really question everything you see. Don't take anything as, just because somebody has X amount of followers online doesn't make them an authority at all.
Mm-hmm.
All that tells me is they know how to generate views and attention. And don't get me wrong, some big accounts do provide good value. But there are way more people that just literally provide content for views, than actual information and value that's going to help you. But with that being said, um, social media has been great, otherwise, right? You just have to find the right information and sift through it. And you have the ability to connect with some really experienced guys in the game, and like, um, really good information. You just have to be able to find that information, right? And I would say,
Yeah.
as somebody that, I started in this era before there was even social media. Like, there was no Instagram when I was learning about bodybuilding. YouTube was around, but I really didn't learn much or use it much as a platform to learn how to build muscle and burn fat and just anything about bodybuilding. A lot of what I learned from was, there used to be articles on bodybuilding.com, which are almost the equivalent of like social media now back then, because
Mm-hmm.
anybody could have wrote them. But also it was mostly, like I said, magazines, books. I had every book on bodybuilding that was available back then. And the truth is, most of that was just ideas on pieces of paper that I then took and applied, and I saw what happened, what the result was, and then I had to use my own logic, common sense, and critical thinking to decide how to change it to optimize it for me, right? So like, so
Mm-hmm.
much of what I learned was through trial and error. And then over the years, as bodybuilding science became more common, a lot of those things that were very basic, were reinforced through science. And I think that that's
Mm-hmm.
a cool thing to see over the years is, the science kind of catches up to what things were working well years ago, right? And I always use that as a reference. The guys back in the 60s, 70s bodybuilding, they trained so basic, but it worked so well, right? And they did that
Mm-hmm.
without science. It was all just trial and error. There was no science saying that that worked. And when you kind of now apply all the advancements in science that we have, it reinforces that the things they were doing back then worked very well. Now, of course, there's plenty of other things that I don't agree with, that I think they take it too far. But again, if we just
Yeah.
again talk about pulling the big levers, a lot of those things were based in that are backed in science, right? And it didn't take
Yeah.
a guy in a lab coat to figure that out. It didn't take a guy in a lab coat to do a study to figure out, okay, if I bench heavy, bench progressively, if I row heavy, row progressively, squat, deadlift, do my pull-ups, I eat sufficient protein, I recover and I grow, and I do this consistently for years at a time, that I'm going to get big and massive, you know? So,
Yeah.
I'd say that, I've gotten, and I'm going off tangent a little bit here, but it's funny because this topic is bringing up a lot of things that I've wanted to address. And one of them is, I've been told by so many different people, like, you're not against science, which I'm not. Because, like, in a lot of my content, it could be misinterpreted as being anti science. What you're
Mm-hmm.
actually saying is the things that are rooted in science, but it's the things that actually work. It's the basics, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I've always had a hard time moving too far away from the basics because my mentality's always been if it isn't broke, don't fix it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if we're using the example of guys that got results 50 years ago, building the type of physiques they built without science, there's not a doubt in my mind that we haven't figured everything out that there is to already. Like,
Exactly.
I don't
Yeah.
think, even with the advancements in science getting better and better, I don't think that there is anything we haven't learned yet. I really
Yeah.
don't.
Because this is about biology, right? Kind of in the realm of biology and the human body. The human body evolves very slowly over time. It's not like in tech where, so I come from a software engineering background, and like what worked 5 years ago could be complete BS and irrelevant today. Even 2 years ago, things change a
Yeah.
lot because
Hmm.
the realm is technology. Technology evolves super fast. It can change overnight. But the human body is this pretty much the same. What builds muscle for you when you were a baby, or for people 100 years ago is going to be the same thing now. It's not
Right.
like your great grandson is going to grow a set of wings.
Right.
And, we evolve super slow. Therefore, the science will also be the same. And, we've been studying it over a decade. There's really not that much left to figure out in terms of training. Maybe in nutrition, I don't know, maybe in supplementation, there might be stuff we haven't figured out. But when it comes to
Hmm.
training,
Yeah.
don't be looking for silver like magic bullet.
Hmm.
I'll bet you all my money there isn't one, and we figured it
Yeah.
all out. And another thing recently that I've kind of like a mindset shift is like old school bodybuilders, while they didn't follow like science, it kind of did like, Mike Menser and,
Hmm.
those were kind of the science guys
Right.
back then,
Hmm.
but they're totally different from the science guys today. Um,
It's funny how that
they,
works, actually.
yeah,
Yeah.
they studied themselves. So they were their own scientists. And that is
Hmm.
the most important thing. Like, study yourself. And that's how they got the physiques they did, is they weren't just following some dogma or something. And sure, there was some dogma in there, but while they were doing it, they were taking notes on
Right.
their
Hmm.
progress, and they were studying themselves and seeing what worked and what didn't. And over time, they filtered out. And the reason why there's so many of them with great physiques and their training styles are very different as well is because a lot of things work, and what works the best for one person training wise will not be the best for someone else. And this is why it's so important for you to track your training
Hmm.
performance, track your diet as well, and study yourself, take notes on what worked for you and what didn't, and over time, slowly refine it.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree 1,000%. And a lot of, it's funny over the years, I've had exposure to a lot of different bodybuilding coaches, and I've trained a lot of different clients that have worked with other coaches. And I never bash any other coach. I don't know everybody's specific method or kind of what their overall goal is, but it's not like this now as much. But maybe even like 10 years ago, 5 years ago, it was very common to see a coach, and some of these are big name coaches, send over a very generic plan to a client, right? When I say, and I mean, it's still a problem now with people sending, generic plans to clients, especially big name people, just because they might be dealing with so many clients, right?
Hmm.
But it was very common to, even if the diet was customized, to send over a generic plan that, like, whatever it was, it just says, follow this routine. It's 4 sets of 8 to 12 on this exercise, 3 sets of 10, 5 sets of 10, whatever it is, right? And it might be a 6 week or a 12 week plan. And it was kind of just like, here, go, right? And one of my biggest things when I coach people is the training plan is usually not written out for longer than 4 to 6 weeks at a time. And it's adjusted and monitored on a weekly basis, like literally week to week. That training plan could change if needed. And then obviously the
Hmm.
diet, the same thing, especially in a fat loss phase. It's monitored on a weekly basis. You know, even right now, you're in prep, we would even adjust it more frequently than a week if needed. But like training, to send somebody a plan and just say, here, go, like there's so many things that could be tweaked to maximize it on a weekly basis. And as you mentioned, that's why it's super important to study what's going on
Mm-hmm.
with your body, because I could see a trend 1 or 2 weeks in a row where either this client is growing or progressing and we've hit the sweet spot, or hey, listen, we're doing way too much volume, we're doing too much frequency, whatever it is, the intensity is too high, too low, or we're just not getting anything out of the training and we need to pick up, you know, the intensity. We need to either add exercises or adjust exercises. And that's why tracking and, like you said, studying what's going on is super important, because you could literally be leaving gains on the table for the next 6 weeks, 12 weeks just by following a plan and hoping for the best, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's super important. Like whether you work with a coach or not, you need to be meticulous about your training too. It's not just I'm going in the gym stimulating muscle and I'm leaving. You know what I mean? You need to be
Yeah.
seeing what's happening. I look at every week, both in terms of training and nutrition, as a week that you're moving towards your goals, right? And if we have a week where we're not productively moving forward, that means that we need to change something, right? Whether that's your diet or your training.
One thing that came up while you were talking is I don't know who said this quote, but what got you here won't get you there. So your training must evolve if you want to evolve. And it shouldn't evolve like, don't change what you're doing week to week all the time. If it's working, stick to it.
Mm-hmm.
But just because it's working now doesn't mean it's going to work in
Yeah.
3 months. So once you do find a routine and diet and everything's locked in, and you're making great progress, don't be demotivated when in 3 months that progress starts to diminish or stop.
Yeah.
And that's not because you just hit your genetic limit. It's like, oh, I had a good plan, doesn't work anymore. Must be I hit my genetic limit. No, it's just you need to evolve to the next step and you need to figure that out in terms of it could be adjusting your volume or frequency. It could also be your sleep has gone down and you need to fix it. There's many causes for plateaus.
Yeah.
And
And
like
I think
unless yeah.
it's a sign that your body's just basically telling you, you know, you've reached this level. It's time to level up now. We need to change something, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, unless you've been training hard for 10 years, you're nowhere near your limit. Don't even
Right.
think about genetics. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a whole topic for we could talk about for hours, right? And I think
Yeah.
that's the first thing people jump to. Okay, hit my ceiling, my genetic limitations, whatever it is. But yeah, when you
Yeah.
really dedicate yourself to grinding it out, not just, you know, when I talk about like dedicating yourself to it, people think that just means, okay, I'm just going to keep pushing myself for years at a time. It's way beyond just doing that. That's part of it. It is literally meticulously looking at everything and every variable and refining it and then
Mm-hmm.
executing on it. That's where
Mm-hmm.
the huge changes come.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, it'll also, you'll find, and this over the long term, that certain splits worked amazing for you in the beginning will
Yep.
not be, there's going to be a different split that'll be the new amazing for you. So
Yeah.
an
hmm
example would be full body. It is awesome for beginners because your
hmm
body's so fertile to stimulus. It is just advantageous to train your entire body 3 to 4 times a week because you're stimulating growth in all areas way more frequently than you could with any other split. But when you get stronger and you're more advanced, you're going to have to warm up more between exercises and it's going to be more demanding. You generate more fatigue because you're moving more weight. Next thing you know, to do a full body session that used to take you an hour and a half, it's taking you 2 to 3 hours.
Yeah.
And that is just not productive anymore. And it's time to find a new routine.
Yeah. And that's the thing too. People love certain ways of doing things, right? And
Hmm.
don't get me wrong, I do too. Like I have ways that I like to train. I have ways that I like to diet. But at this stage in the game for me, what gets me progress is not necessarily the way I like doing things anymore. And I made a
Hmm.
post about this recently. that's been kind of the game changer for me in the last like year, was literally putting aside kind of the things that I enjoy doing for what I need to do, right? And don't get me wrong, a lot of things I enjoy doing are very productive, but like I am just at the stage now in my physique development. I've been doing this 21 years, where again, like what served me very well at a different phase in my journey is not going to be the ideal way to do it now. So I'm doing a
Hmm.
lot of things that I don't necessarily like to do. Don't get me wrong though, I love training. I love everything about it. There are definitely ways that I prefer training that I'm not doing right now, but the results are paying off, and you have to look at, where you're at and determine that appropriately.
And your
Um,
enjoyment may have diminished over time in training, but guess what? You have an amazing physique. Like you're incredibly jacked. So there's that big enjoyment
yeah,
from that that lasts.
well,
Every time you look in the mirror,
yeah,
like sure, your training might be the most fun in the beginning because you're adding 10 pounds to the bar every week, but you're small. And
right.
so it's not like your fitness journey will be less enjoyable over time, is that where you find enjoyment will
Yes, it was
change.
changed. And it's funny because
Mhm.
I always say this too. I love training. I love everything about bodybuilding. I love the process. But if there's one thing I love more than anything else, it's the results.
Yeah.
So as long as I'm getting those results, I'm enjoying everything I'm doing. Whether it's requiring me to suffer through a diet, grueling training sessions, like that's all
Hmm.
part of the process that gets me to the end result, which is what brings me the most joy, is that actual results. So.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's funny because we talked a bit about like poor social media advice and kind of the over science application to training and things like that. But one thing that's not as common anymore for people to bash, and it's not really a hot topic, is more like bro science, right? It's like you're
Hmm.
either attacking science based lifters or you're going completely bro, right? But like, there is definitely bro science, right? And over the years, a lot of things that were once bro science have now been backed by science, and vice versa.
Hmm.
There's been other things that were backed by science that have turned into bro science. So like,
Hmm.
the question really is like, what's one bro science myth that you used to believe that turned out to actually, not be accurate? And for me, it's the perfect example of what I just said, basically, of it once being backed by science and now it's just completely basically BS. The biggest thing, again, during the era that I started in, one of the biggest thing was meal frequency and protein distribution, how it was super important, right? Basically, if you were into bodybuilding and you wanted to build muscle, maintain muscle during a diet, and burn fat, you had to eat protein every 3 hours. Like that was the gold standard. If you deviated off of that path, you're either losing muscle, you're going catabolic, or your biceps are just falling off. And I have to tell you, it was that strong of like everybody agreed on that. It was that strong and that rooted that when I did a contest prep when I was 21, I remember literally like if I left the house, I had to bring my food with me because if I knew I might be 30 minutes longer than 3 hours, I would literally stress out about losing muscle mass. And I remember a funny story during a contest prep. I went on a date to the city with a girl. I brought my cooler bag because I couldn't miss my meals for 3 hours. And then the funny thing is, I don't remember where I ended up. I had to leave the cooler bag somewhere. And I got separated from the cooler bag for about 4 hours, 4.5 hours. And the last hour and a half, remember just freaking out. I'm going to lose muscle. All right. So I'm a lot older and more wiser now, and like that just sounds hilarious to even say. But when I tell you it was very real in my 20s, that's how dogmatic that approach was back then, right? So
Hmm.
that was it for me. I'm curious to hear, like, and again, we kind of started in different, you know, generations. And when you first started, like, it was probably already less common to see people overly obsess about meal frequency, right? Because in the last few years, you've seen people even take completely different approaches where I eat one meal a day, I eat, I intermittent fast. Like there was no such thing as intermittent fasting and bodybuilding back then either. So I'm curious, it doesn't have to be on nutrition, but like as far as like bro science, like what's changed in your eyes kind of like from the beginning when you first started.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned intermittent fasting because that was kind of so I really started to get into fitness around, if you can even call it, the Kino body era,
Okay. Yeah.
where
Hmm.
one of my earliest like influences in fitness was Athlean X and Kino
Okay.
body.
Hmm.
And I actually was doing intermittent fasting. And I wouldn't say there's, if you know how to use it, like it's a tool, right? It's
Hmm.
not
Yeah, I agree.
complete BS dogma, but it was definitely its benefits were overstated. The recent science on, I forgot the word is for like, the cellular repair benefits of
Hmm.
intermittent fasting is not
Yeah,
as
that's a big
big
argument.
as
Yeah, that.
they put forth. And sometimes one thing really bad I did, but not that they promoted, but I would work out fasted,
Hmm.
like weight train fasted, and that is not good
Right.
because I was not tracking my food, so I wasn't necessarily bulking. My muscle glycogen stores were not fully depleted, but not full either.
Right.
And the thing is, when your body doesn't have glycogen, carbs, glucose for fuel, fat is not efficient fuel source for weight
Mm.
training, for intense anaerobic activity. So your body, as it's trying to survive and you're forcing it to keep going in the gym, it will start to break down proteins to keep up with the energy demand. And that is something to definitely avoid. And right now, that is what I avoid at all costs, which is why I drink carb powders intra
Mhm.
workout, is to make damn sure that when I'm training, I have enough fuel, enough carbs as fuel,
Yeah.
so that my body does not ever need to dip into proteins for fuel. But intermittent
Yeah.
fasting was one, and then the other one was intensifiers. I used to do a lot more
Mhm.
supersets and drop sets and this
Yeah.
and that. And, it got me really sore. And, I thought it was really effective because I was always getting sore. But, compared to the training that I built most of my muscle now, I didn't do any intensifiers and I built way more muscle. So those were kind of the two main things
Yeah.
that were bro science that got disproved.
Yeah. That's changed a lot over the years too. And intermittent fasting has made, it made big waves when it was popular. And it's funny because before that, like I said, like when I first started, none of those things would ever be done by anybody looking to
Hmm.
maximize muscle mass. And it's funny how it kind of comes full circle. It's like at
Hmm.
best now, and this is the stance I've always had on it. It's a tool that if it helps you with diet adherence, fine. But beyond that, it's not going to offer any magical advantages. And then there's really just only cons. But if it helps you with diet adherence, that's always the most important thing. But beyond that, there's no additional benefits where it's like going to be
Hmm.
better than simply spacing out your meals.
I think it's most useful in a cut to where you just push your first meal. You just drink some
Yeah, if it
black coffee
helps.
in the
Yeah.
morning. And then that way you can go through your morning to lunch,
Mhm.
not
Yeah.
eating anything. And then you have a smaller window to cram the small amount of food you're eating
Mm.
to where you feel more full,
Right.
satiated throughout your day. So that way, I think it's helpful. But other than that, it's no magic
No.
tool that's gonna get you shredded and uh, triple your growth hormone, your natural
No.
growth
Yeah.
hormone production, and yeah, whatnot.
All
And
right. Yeah.
also the one thing real quick, there's this logic or argument that, oh, you just weren't intermittent fasting, right? Because your insulin sensitivity is super high when you're fasted, so you have to break it slowly. And if you don't, you're going to put on a lot of fat. If you're not tracking what you're eating, sure. But
Right.
if you're
Mm.
controlling the amount of daily calories, it's not going to matter. You're not going to put on, let's say you ate two slices of cheesecake after a fast, but if you still kept your daily calories at maintenance or lower, that's going to result in no fat gain.
Right.
It's cool. It's a tool
if it
if you
if
know
it
how to use
works,
it.
I have some guys over the years that just have either utilized it before working with me, and we've implemented the plan within an intermittent fasting framework, and it works
Hmm.
fine. But I've never had a guy where, listen, the game changer was fasting, right? Like if it fits your lifestyle, fits your preferences, go with it. If you're looking to maximize, I wouldn't even attempt it. But if it offers you personally an advantage as far as diet adherence and it helps, I have no problem with it.
Hmm.
But I
Yeah.
wanted to switch a little topic because me and you are both big fans of old school bodybuilding and bodybuilders, right? And I know a
Yep.
lot of people watching this are also. And this is an era where it really, like, when I think about bodybuilding, not taking anything away from bodybuilders today, but like when I think about like what represents bodybuilding, like to me, that is like the heart and soul of bodybuilding, right? That's what got me into it.
Hmm.
The pumping iron era, these guys back in the 60s, 70s, right? So I'm curious to hear, and most people will know some of my favorite bodybuilders. Arnold Schwarzenegger was obviously kind of the guy that got me into it, pumping iron. Like I said, I watched that film one time and I've never been the same since. You know, like literally hit the gym the next day and haven't stopped since. But like a lot of these guys back then, like really like their mentalities resonate with me. I'm a huge fan of not only their training methods, but more so the training mentality, right? So like,
Yeah.
I was really a big fan of, guys like, like Sergio Oliva, like we spoke about this, like, the stories that I've heard from people that have reached out to me talking about like how he trained, how hard, how frequent, like just that work ethic and mentality he had, like that resonated so much with me. I'm a huge fan of like, I don't apply super low volume, high intensity training methods like Mike Menser, but again, the mentality behind putting in the hard work and focusing on the things that will work. That's something that's always resonated with me so much. Guys like Casey Viator, who basically trained underneath Menser, who was just like such a young guy with like brutal work ethic, built such a massive physique at a young age. Like all these guys, I'm just a huge fan of that era. And I've spoken a lot about even guys on the opposite end of the spectrum back then, guys like Serge Nubret, who were just he was a massive volume trainer. Like we're talking
Hmm.
about like 50 sets in a session, right? And when we put aside for a second the science and like what builds muscle and what's optimal, at the end of the day, the characteristic that all these guys share is the focus on the things that are producing results, right? And just
Hmm.
executing them with 100% effort and consistency. Whether
Hmm.
you decided to use low volume, high frequency, whatever it is, one thing you could say about all these guys, they focused on what worked for them and they just kept hammering away at it relentlessly. And that's always been the thing that has motivated me and inspired me to get into bodybuilding, because these are not the type of guys where if you would have put a study in front of their face where they would have just said, okay, there's a new study out, I'm going to completely abandon my approach. They're
Hmm.
so rooted in what works for them through experimentation that they execute it regardless of what other people are doing. And I think that was the cool thing
Hmm.
about that era too. There really wasn't a trend. It was like you had guys doing all different things. A lot of the things were basic. And that's where the commonalities came into place. Again, like these guys were all doing basic lifts because that's all that was available. But you
Hmm.
had guys training like Arnold where you were doing 2-a-day sessions 6 days a week. You had guys like Menser who were preaching lower volume. You had guys like Serge Nubret who would just do relentless amount of volume in a session. But again, all focusing on what worked, focusing on the basics and consistency and living the lifestyle. So I'm curious, like I know you're a fan of old school bodybuilding too. Like what bodybuilders have you kind of resonated with? Like what part of that era is kind of the thing that got you into it?
Yeah, it's funny with bodybuilders. I can't name a favorite. I have a favorite
Yeah.
for like a lot of different things, like favorite for back, and then favorite for mentality, favorite for overall physique.
Hmm.
One of the names that comes to mind right now is Tom Platz. I absolutely
Hmm.
love watching his videos and him speak. And it's just his training mentality of leaving the gym not a loser and giving it everything you have, like your life depends on it. It
Hmm.
makes the gym more fun too, where you're not just I'm here to do 48 reps
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
two sets of each. It's you're not math
Yeah,
problem
it's
or
just
something.
checking off boxes. And I think that that's the biggest thing people do today that
Yeah.
holds them back.
Yeah, and it's like you go in there and you're fighting for your life. There's a purpose behind every rep you're doing. You're pushing yourself to the max and like testing your limits in there every day. And it helps to kind of romanticize the process in a way to like it feels bigger than yourself. Like you have a purpose in there. It's not just about stimulating muscle growth. It's about proving to yourself you have what it takes and testing your true limits and growing. and not physically, but mentally and in all aspects. And that's kind of to go out on a little tangent. Why I love bodybuilding is I came into it just for, more bigger biceps and abs, but I left like a whole
Yeah,
transformed person. And it is
yeah,
such a simple way
mhm,
for anyone to get into to kind of turn their life around and
yeah,
build themselves in all aspects by just, you don't need all this. There's no complication. It's just iron and you and your effort and your mind. And it's a beautiful way to really transform as a whole person. You get exactly what you put into it.
yeah. I love that, man, and it's funny because I say it all the time. Like I was very fortunate to be involved in bodybuilding at such a young age. Like I discovered it at
Hmm
14, and I could tell you that every single thing I do in life, I've taken some experience from bodybuilding that it's taught me, and it has enhanced every other aspect of my life because of it. Like had I not gotten involved in bodybuilding and learned those experiences at a young age and what it's taught me,
hmm
other areas of my life would not be where they are now. Like I have literally applied everything that I have learned through bodybuilding can be applied to every area of life. So that's one of the things I'm so grateful for as far as discovering it at a young age, and one of the biggest things I love about it. Like it literally is an expression of everything else in my life. And it has been my biggest teacher in everything. And with
hmm
that said, I wanted to ask you because I wanted to talk a little bit more about kind of how we connected because now you're at the level where you're a coach yourself, but it wasn't like that for wasn't like that always. So at a certain point, you were still looking to kind of maximize your progress and to take things to the next level. So at a certain point, you obviously came across me. And I'm curious, my coaching program, like what made you decide like I'm gonna sign up and I'm gonna take my physique to the next level through coaching. Like tell me about like that. We never really spoke about that.
Yeah, so the point in life I was at when we first started was this was a little bit after the COVID lockdowns ended in, or was it even during the lockdowns? I know it was after COVID, thinking, yeah, December 2022. Right. That's when I was sending my first check-in photos. So at that point, I had stopped working out during COVID, just like I imagine everyone else, because lockdowns. And at that point, actually, I started working out myself when things opened up again, but I just wanted to make sure that I'm doing everything in my power. And leading up to that point, I worked out about 2 years in college, 3 days a week, following Body's Greek God program. And I worked out on and off in high school. It'd be 1 month where I showed up 3 days a week and month where I didn't show up at all. The kind of person I was, I did a lot more research than I actually did. So I
Mhm.
watched a ton of YouTube, ton of different YouTubers, and I consumed a lot more information in theory than putting
Right.
into
Mhm.
action. And that is when I decided where I will invest in someone else that will tell me how to maximize what I'm doing. And I found you, and what appealed to me about you was it was the no nonsense, because at that point, I've consumed enough information to know more than half of what I consumed was nonsense. And I liked your simplistic, it made sense. Everything was logical. There's no magic exercises and this and that. It was all based in reality. And I just want to commit. And it's funny, I say like I want to give it everything I had. And looking back, compared to what I'm doing now, I did not
Yeah.
give it everything I had, but it was arguably one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life because that started this journey. I found a new purpose in life. I gained confidence in myself and I achieved a level I did not think was genetically possible for me. Because in high school, I was never an athlete. I always, for so many years, actually, I obsessed over testosterone because I always believed that I was a low testosterone kid. I was shy, I was quiet, I got picked on in school. And it's funny, in high school, I was more concerned about just having abs and a sharp jawline and just being attractive to girls. And I would do low fat diets and low
Hmm.
carb. And I'm sure that also affected my hormones from depleting myself of especially fat. But yeah, in my head, I always thought like, I just want to look a little muscular. I know I can't because I'm a low testosterone guy and I just don't have the testosterone to be like
Funny,
how I want to be in my dreams, and that
funny
all
how
turned out to be false.
funny how social media and marketing and everything like that puts that in people's heads, especially now. Like that's a huge like pain point for most people. Like especially with like the trend of like testosterone boosters and like
Mm-hmm.
hormone clinics becoming more popular and everything. Like
Mm-hmm.
everybody is insecure that like they might be the low testosterone male.
Yeah.
But it's funny. I mean, but what you're saying is so relatable. I think to almost anybody watching this, they've at least had that concern at one point in their life. If not, they're probably struggling with it now. And we've spoken about this too. And I've told you this before. I work with tons of different people. I work with guys that are natural who don't compete. I work with guys who are natural that are pro natural bodybuilders. I work with guys that are enhanced, right? I work with guys in between older men on hormone replacement therapy. And what I will tell you is for a lot of people that are in that position that you were in where they're kind of like, oh, I have high, low testosterone? Is it holding me back? Some of the best natural bodybuilders, and I'm talking about again like pro level natural bodybuilders, have very average level testosterone levels. And I've seen this through blood work. Like there's nothing magical in terms of bodybuilding to having higher levels of normal testosterone. Now, obviously, if you talk about
Mm-hmm.
enhanced guys with levels 5, 6, even 10 times the average male, there's a significant difference. But if you're a guy who's worried, like, okay, my testosterone level is 500, it's not 900, I
Mm-hmm.
promise you, you're causing more harm than good stressing over that than any benefit you would have with a 700, 800 level testosterone. So it's
Mm-hmm.
funny. I've been there myself when I was younger again too. Like there's not as much information as there is now on the subject. But through the years and years of experience, and like I said, working with so many different types of clients, it's funny when I see how stressed out people are over something like that. And it's not as big of an issue as marketing and social media will make it believe. Because again, the people promoting that type of stuff are probably selling you something as well.
Yep. Exactly. And like my advice to anyone out there who might be in my shoes right now is unless you're feeling real symptoms of
Yeah.
low testosterone, sure, it's a good idea to get it checked. But
Hmm.
otherwise, if you're eating a healthy diet and you feel healthy, don't worry about it. The numbers are
Yeah.
not going to make a difference. Bumping it up 100, 200,
Right.
400, 500 is really not going to make it any difference that you think it will. And it is just stop thinking about your genetics and think about what you could be doing better and
Right.
just do it and be even delusional in the
Yeah.
belief in
Yeah.
yourself. It can only benefit. And, even I'd argue science backs this up because placebo is a real thing,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
what the mind believes. And
Yeah.
there's studies out there that showed like they gave a group of men, real steroids and then
Mm.
group
Yeah.
placebo. And the
Funny.
placebo
Yeah.
group actually exhibited
Yeah.
steroid side effects and the growth too, even
Yeah.
though they were taking sugar. And
Yeah.
it's
Wild.
like
Yeah.
when you have full belief in what you're
Yeah.
doing,
Hmm.
there's absolute no harm in it. People like to be realistic and bound in
Yeah.
reality, but well, it can serve you in some sense when it comes to believing in yourself. Always be 100%. Always
Yeah.
bet on yourself, believe in yourself, believe in what you're doing. And it doesn't mean be blind, like don't be blindfolded in your training, just pick one training and then,
Right.
track your performance and be
Yeah.
analytical in that sense of yourself, but always have full faith in what you're doing.
Yeah. It's huge. Huge. I mean, I'm glad you brought that up because that's a big part of what I believe in myself, and I try to explain this to people too. Like at the end of the day, the reason people get such good results a lot of times working with a coach is simply because if they fully trust that that coach is going to get them to their result, whatever plan that coach lays out for them, if they have full belief and trust in that plan, they're going to execute it to a level that they would never execute the plan that they laid out for themselves. Because if they're
Mm-hmm.
doubting their own approach, they might have the right approach, but if they're even second guessing it or doubting it, they're not going to put that same 100% belief and faith in the program. And then how they execute on it is going to be affected dramatically by that.
Mm-hmm.
So whether you could get to that level yourself where you have full faith and trust in the program, or you have a coach helping you and you fully trust that that coach is going to get you there, that could be the game changer that you need to get the results that you don't even believe that you can get. And
Mm-hmm.
that's when it happens, when you have that full 100% faith in the process and you execute it 100%. And that's very applicable actually to where you're at right now, because you're in a contest prep scenario, right? Like this is something
Mm-hmm.
completely new to you. This is going to be your first show. You're competing for the first time, and we talked about how even just a few years ago you were reaching levels in your physique development that you didn't even think were possible. Right now,
Mm-hmm.
contest prep is a completely different ball game as far as you're
Yeah.
getting leaner than you've ever been before. You're putting in work that you never probably felt you had to make results, and it's just a completely different ball game. So I'm curious, like at your stage now, because this is first time contest prep for you, like what has been your most challenging thing getting ready for this show? Like has it been physical, mental? Like what has been, and I could talk about this for hours from experience, but I'm very curious because you're in it right now. Like, well, like, how's that feel? Like, what is the biggest challenge for you right now?
As challenging as it might be, I'm still enjoying the process overall,
Hmm.
and I have no regrets, being where I am today. But I think personally for me, what was most challenging is diet. My whole life, I've always been around 20% body fat or higher. I was skinny fat most of my childhood, early childhood, back when I ate Eggo waffles and Nutella every morning,
Yeah,
drank Coca-Cola. I was even fluffier, but so I've never ever been this lean before. And also getting here was hard, like the diet, but just looking in the mirror just balances out because I'm
yeah,
just every time I catch a reflection of myself, it's just like, holy shit, is that me? And, it, as hard as it is to get this lean, it is not just difficulty. Like, there is reward to it. The
yeah,
reward doesn't just come if you win on the show day. And I am also increasing my discipline, right? It takes discipline. And the way
yeah.
you get more discipline is being more disciplined, if that
Hmm.
makes sense. But yeah, the biggest fight was just my appetite.
Yeah,
And I love eating, I love food, and it's just fighting the urge to keep eating. But when you're,
yeah. That's normal at this stage. Yeah,
yeah, when you're driven, the fulfillment you get pursuing
yeah,
your purpose is bigger than the fulfillment you get eating chocolate, peanut
right.
butter, and whatever you love to eat. It's totally doable for anyone. I am not a special person by any means, and anyone can do what I'm doing today. I hope like that's one of my biggest missions with social media is to show that I'm nobody special and everyone can do what I'm doing and just, believe in yourself pretty much.
Yeah,
But
yeah. I agree 100%. I mean, it's a message I like to try to put out there too as well, because I mean, my whole life, when I say my whole life, like I've been doing this since I'm 14, but it's like you mentioned, when you were younger and you didn't diet or train, like you didn't just naturally have a great physique. It's not like there's
yeah.
genetic anomalies where it's like they're just ripped with muscle
Hmm.
doing nothing. I actually know a few people like that. I'm not one
Hmm.
of them. We're not one of them. So what you see is literally just, the culmination of 21 plus years of just basically hammering this over and over again, right? And that's where you
Hmm.
get to the results that you want to get, short of just hitting the genetic lottery, right? So I
Hmm.
didn't have that advantage, you didn't have the advantage, so we had to work for it. But it's totally fine. I'm willing to work for it. I love the process, and I'm willing to do it. And that is there available for anybody who wants it. You just have to put in the work and you have to dedicate yourself to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like for you, coming from that place to where you are now, and now being a coach helping other people, like what was really like the main motivator for you saying, okay, I've got my physique and you're still progressing, like you're still getting to your best physique, but like what has been the biggest thing for you that's made you want to help other people do that as well?
Combination of, I think, two things. So, for my whole life, I've always felt the biggest fulfillment and joy helping other people. And, this was since I was a kid, and in any aspect of life, even at work, in the software industry. And whenever someone asks me for help, I've always found that that's where pay the most attention, help right away. And I've noticed that, I ignored it most of my life, which is why I ended up picking that career. Is I autopiloted a lot of my life, kind of took other people's advice, and I was, as a kid, just the only thing I really cared about was just having fun, playing video
Mhm.
games, and that's where my attention was. And I didn't really care too much about it. I did well enough in school, so my parents didn't take away my Xbox, and
Mhm.
didn't flunk college, so that the money was well spent. But yeah, going back to the question, is like I always knew that I found the biggest purpose in helping others. And even in high school, middle school, I've always liked to slowly improve myself. And, working out, I felt enjoyment. I didn't see a lot of results, but I still did it. I've tried calisthenics. I did a little bit of boxing, and did a little bit of everything. I tried and quit a lot of stuff. I never stuck to anything. And my hedonism as a kid and indulging in pleasure was kind of what held me back. But when I made this revelation to where, everything changed after when you started coaching me, it was this giant, like, holy shit moment. There's so many people like me out there that need to know this. And I've such a strong urge, and because I enjoy helping others, I've aligned this as my life purpose now, is to help others, and using fitness as that medium. And I enjoy fitness. It's my passion. I love doing it. And then also it can reach the most people. A pastor can help people too. That's their mission. But, religion is not everyone's religious, especially nowadays. But fitness is something everyone can get into in all different areas of the world and stages of life and beliefs. And that's pretty much what, I guess it's kind of three things, but why I want to be a coach and why I want to be as successful as I can is, and what gives me purpose, like the driving purpose behind being a coach.
Yeah, and man, like I said, I've told you this, off air when we've had conversations, like the transformation you've made, not just with your physique, but your mindset, your level of education, your mentality, and your ability to help other people has grown tremendously since we started working together. Um, and I am the type of person where I don't just let anybody under my wing and take part in what I do because I am so passionate about doing things the right way. And I haven't really come across anybody where um, I feel like they are able to put that same message out there and help people the way I would do it personally. But until we started working together, like I said, you're the one guy that like I am 100% confident in. Where if somebody came to me and they're like, Pete, I need you to help me, and I couldn't, and I referred them to you, I would feel 100% confident knowing they're going to get that same level of help and results if they're willing to put in the work. And the awesome part about it is, like I said, this is something that happened very naturally with us working together. You basically were put under my training program without having to do it because you were a client. So you know all my methods, my teachings, how things work through every phase. So it's awesome that we're like 100% on the same page when it comes to that. Um, so I'm really happy to have you on board, man. Is what I'm trying to say. And I'm really
Yeah, I'm
looking
happy to be
forward.
here.
I'm really looking forward to seeing what we could do together, because now we have the ability to reach much more people. We have the ability to, work together on this, and anybody that's ready to kind of take that next step, um, and come on board for coaching and looking to take their physique to the next level, um, I'm really happy to have you on board with me doing that. And I'm looking forward to helping as many people as we can. And with that said, I've been doing this for years by myself. Now that you're on team with me, um, we have some big things kind of in the pipeline that we're getting ready for, and we're looking forward to helping a lot of people and making some big transformations. And one of the next big things coming up, which I'm just going to kind of mention it briefly because I'm going to tell you guys about it a lot more specifically in the coming weeks. But we got about 2 weeks. I'm really excited for it. We're going to be launching a free challenge that we're offering to anybody that wants to be on board. So I anticipate this thing's going to be really big. We're going to start it officially in 2 weeks, which would be that would be March 24th. By the time this comes out, this should be about 2 weeks from now, and we're going to do it. It's going to be a free 1 week challenge for everybody to sign up. Um, we're both going to put you guys, through the ringer. We're going to get you set up as if you are one of our official clients, and we're going to put you to work, and you guys are going to see exactly what it's like to be coached by us, and what the experience is going to be like. And our goal with this, again, is to get you guys off on the right plan, show you guys the right way to do things. We're going to remove all the fluff, all the nonsense, all the confusion. We're going to focus on the things that work. All you got to do is be willing to put in the work and the execution. And I guarantee you guys are going to see some big changes in the way things happen for you, even in just 1 week. I tell people all the time, results take time, but when you lay down the foundation and you do the right things on a daily basis, you're going to know, you're going to see it, and you're going to feel it right away. And that's kind of the objective with this. We want to get everybody off to a right start, and get you experiencing doing things the right thing without the confusion, without the hype, without the nonsense. Like, this is just all about results. So I'm super excited about it. Um, and I am welcoming all you guys who are ready to take on this challenge to join it. I will be posting a lot more information in the coming days, but it is ready to go and available to all you guys. So I'm super hyped about this. And yeah, I'm looking forward to starting it with you. And yeah, for anybody that's on the fence about doing something like this, or even working with a coach in general, like, I'm curious, what would you say to them? Because again, you were in that place not too long ago where you, like you said, you were consuming a ton of information, but you got to the point where you said, you know what, um, it's time to kind of, hop on board with a coach and take it to the next level. So like, what would you say to anybody that's like on the fence about, having a coach? What would you say to them?
Like for me, what held me back from getting a coach in the past was just, there's so much information available. I would think like, why would I need to pay for information when I have YouTube, when I have the internet, when I have this and that? And there's like people with PhDs citing sources and all this free information out there. And that's the thing is there's too much free information and you don't have the knowledge and experience to know what's going to work for you, what isn't. And a lot of that information, there's, truths and lies in it, and not even, and it depends on the person too, because we have different recovery abilities, different genetics, different lifestyles, and it's the best plan is the one that's tailored for you. You don't have the knowledge and experience to do that for yourself, and it is so worth the money to get a coach. I have absolutely no regrets. Don't actually, I do have regret. I regret not doing it sooner. And it is transformative. And you know what? The price may seem steep because, it's a lot. It's not like Netflix where it's $10 a month. And, there's fitness apps out there that probably have
Hmm.
some sort of like, oh, pay $10 a month and AI generates a routine for you. And all AI is doing is not really studying you, but guessing
Yeah.
that's what AI does. Guess what comes next from the prompt given to it. So get a good coach and follow through. You will be amazed by the results you'll make. Do not doubt yourself. If you haven't tracked your macros and followed an optimized training plan for you, you have absolutely no idea what your potential is. Everyone watching, I guarantee you, you have zero idea what you're truly capable of. And it'll take you just way too long to kind of sort it out yourself online for free. Even today, with all social media and the information out there, it's information overload. But
100%. Yeah, I couldn't have said it better than myself. I feel the exact same way, and I think that, at least from my experience with all the clients that I've worked with over the years, um, that's been the biggest game changer. Just removing that information overload aspect, and that's probably one of the things most people suffer with before working with a coach. Most guys, 99% of them, I always speak to all my clients before we end up, usually it's a matter of deciding if we're a good fit and if I could help the client. And 99% of the time during that conversation, one of the biggest things they're struggling with is information overload. So the coaching process is literally the fastest and most efficient way to removing that information overload and just focusing on one plan and executing on it. So, yep, anybody on the fence, um, we're going to be launching this challenge again in 2 weeks. It's totally free for you guys to join. So, if you're even remotely thinking about it, join, get the experience, go from there. We're both really pumped to get this thing going. We got 2 weeks, so March 24th, it's going to officially launch. I will be posting a lot more about this on YouTube, on my social media, so I'll be posting about it on Instagram as well. Anybody that's on my email list, I'll be emailing you guys. So I'm making sure everybody gets the message and the availability to join because I don't want anybody to miss out on this opportunity. It's going to come and go very quickly. So make sure you guys are keeping an eye out on YouTube, on Instagram. Check your emails. Make sure you're following both of us on social media. I'll put links to both of our YouTube channels, both of our Instagrams, handles, and just be on the lookout. I am going to be blasting this out for you guys because I don't want anybody to miss out. So that's all we got time for today. We actually went a little bit over how long I wanted to record this, but as always, when we get talking about some of these topics, I just enjoy it so much. Again, I could probably
hmm,
easily go for 3 hours. There was some stuff I actually wanted to touch on that we didn't get a chance to. If you guys liked this video and you want to see us do more of these, let me know. I'm happy to do this on a regular basis and give you guys a bit of a different format. So that's all we got for today. We're both going to be looking forward to working with you guys, everybody in the challenge. So stay tuned for that. I will release more information in the coming weeks. But for now, that's all we got. And we will see you guys on the next one.
thanks for tuning, guys. Hope to see you in the challenge.